Welcome to Changing Times, Changing Worlds. And this is the Otherworldly show. I'm afraid I'm still stuck on. We had the conference last week, but this is Otherworldly, the Changing Times, Changing Worlds show between the conferences, and we are. And tonight we have a new guest who hasn't been on before. This Vivien Monroe is an author, educator, founder of the Women's Mystery School, which we definitely will put a link up to. She integrates the training as a priestess and gifts as an intuitive channel with decades of study of mysticism, spirituality, personal growth for women. Tap into reservoirs of inner power. That sounds really good. Honor their intuitive wisdom, unapologetically live life on their own terms. Now, is that pretty cool or what? And so we're going to re-embrace the role of the crone, which has been an insult and a slur for too many years. And now that we're now that the baby boomers have hit that age, we say, hey, no, wait a minute. It's got to be, we got to make it good for us. So anyway, so take it away, Vivien. We're very pleased to have you here.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I am excited to be in this group. It just feels like a beautiful community. So yay.
We like it.
So as you mentioned, I founded the Women's Mystery School, and I love women's mysteries. And part of women's mysteries are the blood mysteries. And one of the most misunderstood blood mysteries are the ones connected to menopause, which is the crone. And as you said, the crone has been given a bad name for way too long and has been shamed, and people, women have come to want to disassociate from that. And there's just a lot of negative press around it, when actually, if you look at the true history and underpinnings, there's a lot of power and honor that comes with Cronehood. So that's what I wanted to address today. In our culture, Western modern culture, we tend to not really talk about the gifts of elderhood and aging. And in some indigenous communities, they actively recognize the gifts that come, particularly with Cronehood. So because a crone is no longer bleeding, her blood is considered to be wise blood, carry wisdom, carry magic, carry power. So when she stops bleeding, it is seen that she's holding on to that, and her own wisdom amplifies and increases. So she then becomes this powerhouse. And in some cultures, the crones are the wise women, the women who sit on the councils, the women who are sought for advice, for knowledge. They, advise, make decisions, and they're also the memory keepers. They remember the history of their group, of not just their family, but the community, the lineage of the ancestors and what has come before, what is now, and they are invested in what is coming next. They are invested in the youth and what is being seeded for the future. So the crone is this beautiful, all-encompassing holding for not just herself, but the community. And another piece of Cronehood that I think is important, and as women move into midlife and start approaching that, we start feeling into this more and more, is the crone stops giving away all of her energy and starts to hold on and center in self. Because we spend a lot of time caring for others and putting out and giving, and not a lot gets left for us. But the older we get and the closer we move into Cronehood, the more we're like, you know what? I'm calling BS. this is not okay anymore. And I'm going to start taking space and time for me. And you can come to me for my wisdom and guidance. I am done like chasing after you and giving and giving. So that's a really fun part of Cronehood. And there's several gifts that also happen. Again, in several cultures, women's blood is considered to not just be wise, but also have power in it. And so in some cultures, once a woman goes through menopause, it is then that she becomes a shaman, because it is considered that all of her intuitive, psychic, healing abilities, like they just snap online or amplify whatever she already has. So it's this beautiful intensification of the power that's already ours, of our intuition, of our insight, of our healing. And we also, you know, as you go into Cronehood, you have the gift of discernment. It's easier to call out BS. It is easier to see like what matters and what doesn't. Big picture versus, you know, momentary really doesn't matter. And that also makes Crones truth tellers, because they can call it as they see it. And they don't worry who it's going to upset, because they're back into, you know what, I'm done catering for others. I'm going to stand in truth. I'm going to speak for truth, and I'm going to speak for the highest and greatest good, not just of the family, but of the entire community. So with all of this, I mean, there's so many layers of power and beauty within Cronehood. I believe this is one of the reasons why in our patriarchal culture, the crone has been turned into the hag and has been insulted, demeaned. Women don't want to be associated or connected with it, because if we are convinced that cronehood is something we don't want, if we are convinced that we have an expiration date and that's when we're, you know, no longer really helpful or useful or as wanted, then we stay disconnected from our power. We stay disconnected from knowing our truth and being able to stand in it. Because like I said, the crone has discernment, is a truth teller, has increased clarity and intuition and healing, is a wisdom keeper. And when you fully stand in that power, you can't be swayed. Like you are a force to be reckoned with. And so that can be threatening to others who seek to control or dominate. So one of the ways that you can stop that from happening is to shame the archetype and tell women, no, you don't want to be that. A crone is this old hag and she's ugly and crotchety and no one wants to be around her. But it's just a ploy. There is so much beauty in cronehood, which is why I'm passionate about talking about it and helping women to return to their own mysteries, their own blood mysteries, and the power that's inherent in them through this, and to just call BS on all of the negative, propaganda. So these are the pieces that I love about the crone, and I'm really interested in hearing what you all think, what experiences you've had, what resonates with you, what additional pieces are there that I might not have mentioned. I'd love to hear the combined wisdom of this council that we are currently in. So please share. What are your thoughts and experiences and insights?
Well, how does any of this change if you are a woman who never had children and you're now you've now reached menopause and you're not bleeding anymore?
Because for me, menopause and the blood mysteries has nothing to do with procreation.
Okay. So the maiden mother crone, if I was never mother.
Nope. And
Okay.
mother is so limited to like a physical child. If we look at the archetype of mothering, like mothering, if we think of a healthy, good mother, there's nurturance, there's compassion, there's boundary setting, there's guidance, there's teaching.
Okay, so not literally. Okay.
Exactly. You have mothered, just not a human child of your own, DNA.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see.
There it is.
Okay, I see in the chat, what about women who have never bled or who have very early menopause? Crone seems to be more attached to age. Yes, there's a lot out there that does equate Crone with age, but in my definition, it's attached to no longer bleeding. So if you stop bleeding at 32, then you've entered into Cronehood, because for me, the crone is holding on to that blood magic, that blood wisdom, that the power, that primal first power that we have. And so that is my definition, which is not the only one. And you can choose to define Crone or Cronehood in any way that makes you feel empowered.
I thought that I would just throw in a joke that we made some years ago, was that it's not just three, that it made in Mother Crone. It's there's a stage between Mother and Crone, and that's denial. But it's we have bought into it, and I think part of that may have been the whole baby boomers never trust anyone over 30, and we had to go through frequent redefining ourselves to discover that it's okay to be whatever age we are. I still think that we all consider old to be our parents' generation. So, being 70, you're not old until you're at least 85 or 90, because we always keep pushing it off. I'm not old. I'm just me, and my friends are, but there's a whole lot of denial going around. But
well, I think I'm not surprised either that the first questions we're getting are validating our position as Crones, our standing as Crones.
Yeah, which men go through too, not as Crones, but there's this massive transition you go through when, in fact, you exit your reproductive years. And in prehistoric times, you would be discarded as no longer useful. But now we just have this great big bucket of angst. And you like that, huh? But yeah, I really relate to the concept that what used to be your primary and virtually only function in life is now gone. So a bit of a tough nugget.
Yeah.
I'm not old either. It's just kids these days. Anybody, don't trust any under 50,
oh, baby boomers are so
extra.
Full of ourselves. But no, it's a little bit harder in a culture. I keep fantasizing about being in a culture where old people are revered and respected and turned to, and now we are at least a little bit not as important, because there is far larger literacy, and then there's the internet. Who needs a grandmother when you can Google?
Right.
We also have the speed of cultural change, because in much earlier times, things did not change so quickly. So everything your grandmother knew was still relevant. And now we got that your own parents can't figure out the technology.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that's been taken away, is that as a store of relevant information,
Mm.
just being old and having a lot of experience doesn't do much anymore.
Yeah, we actually literally live in a world different than what we were born into and grew up in.
Oh yeah.
And whether whether there's value that the younger generations find in that previous world or not, it seems a little lacking.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also value that we see again in the, I'm going to call them the Crone years, of a shift. Like there's a calming, there is a perspective. Again, there's the discernment, which in youth, there's a lot of like hyperactivity and rushing, and let's rush here and let's get this done and let's hurry up and let's do this. And it's the elders that teach us, slow down, take a breath, put this into perspective. Like and that's relevant no matter what the technology, no matter what the culture. I think it's basic human wisdom teachings, the role of family, the role of deep listening, of presence, of slowing down. And I think as more technology comes in, we need that more because we're losing it. And so it's the Crones and the elders who can remind us of what it is to be with physical humans in the same room and listen, to connect, to be together. That's not, through a technological mediator.
Right.
And I mean, that's always relevant and necessary, even more so the more we get behind these electronic walls.
Yeah, I have found that I'm a little worried about myself, because recently I have been expressing the teenagers, by which I mean, I remember when I was that young. I remember when I was that inexperienced. I remember when I was that excited about the things I was upset about. They will learn that it won't be as bad as they're afraid of it as, but the impatience of I worry that I'm dismissing teenagers, but it's not because I don't remember being one. It's because I do remember being one, and how much I've chilled since then. And that but I worry that when the teenagers hear me just dismissing the entire group, that it is not showing proper respect for what they have already learned, what they may know better than I do about this world. I mean, certainly one wouldn't want to dismiss Greta Thunberg or many of the other wonderful activists who are standing forward as baby boomers stood against the war, as Gen Xers stood against Roundup, and each generation stands up against the injustices of the previous one. But we want to help them, support them without quenching their fire, because their fire is the fever that will burn away our disease.
I think it might have been Diana Paxton in the past week or so, maybe it was somebody else, but at the conference, who made a comment about, or maybe I read it somewhere even, about the younger generation, the teenagers and young adults being the ones who have the energy to go out and do the picket lines and march on Washington and, throw the rocks if they need to. And part of our job is to encourage them and help them do it safely, and help them make wise choices about what to do and where and when.
Yeah. Yeah. It's honoring the gifts of every age.
Mhm.
Each group carries something that we need as a collective. And
Mhm.
so honoring that and learning to work together, as you just said, about how, yes, we need the energy of them out there protesting, but also offer them the wisdom of how, maybe how to do so more safely, or what's, the best way to plan it out or strategize. Again, it's like each age has its gift, and it's learning how we can see that and acknowledge it, and also honor our own, because there is ageism both ways.
Yeah.
There are young ones who get dismissed because, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You haven't lived. I've been around the block. And then elders also get dismissed with, well, you're not in touch with what's happening now, and you don't understand, and you don't know. So
That's when we have to tell them the stories about when we protested in our time. Tell them that we know what they're doing and why and how, and we've done it too.
yes.
Yeah. And one of the things that occurs to me there is you also have to push them a little bit to justify what are you protesting and why? Because Lord knows, inexperience will trick you into carrying the wrong torch.
Are you protesting at the right person or things or organization? For instance.
Are you protesting at a target that can actually make change? But even, of course, just having, corporate executives look out their windows, see 50,000 people outside of headquarters, even the slow ones pick up the hint.
Yeah. So I'm curious what gifts you have personally experienced as you have gotten older, regardless of if you're in a Crone period or not. What are the gifts for you?
Well, for me, it's been a natural complement to my Zen practice of 30 years. And I come back to, I don't remember who said it, but it was really good. He said, we call ourselves human beings, but if you look at us, we're not human beings, we're human doings. We're always trying to do things. And slowing down enough to figure out what to do, why, and when. I mean, you look at the basic tenets of Buddhism. I can't recite all of the parts of the path, but right action, right speech, all of that stuff. And you need a certain calmness and center to do that. And calmness and center just does not come easily or naturally to us. And we have to work at it. And if anybody tells you that Zen meditation isn't work, obviously has never tried to get up at the same time every day, sit in the same chair, and try just to think of nothing for 20 minutes. And it's that discipline. But of course, it also made me think of a thought I had as these things just pop into my head. I was going into a store one day, and some of the younger type went zooming by me, and I suddenly thought, why is it we who have so little time left have so much patience with things, and the ones who have all the time in the world can't get there fast enough? But as they say and goes, die get too soon old and too late smart.
I may know the answer to that one, is that I still have the urge. I still have the urge to go fast, but I don't have the energy to do it.
Well, yeah.
So
I
it's
mean,
kind
that's
of
like me. You talk about protesting. I marched on the kitchen tonight and protested the dirty dishes.
And I am so grateful for it.
But I do I have a lot of accumulated, I'm not going to say wisdom, but information.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah,
and
useful stuff.
my thing is context, is the more places you can draw things in from, the more you can combine them to say, I'm very big on generalism as opposed to specialization. And so I've got all of these connections that I think are very useful to make. Like, are you aware that in this area, history tells us this, and anthropology tells us that, and I mean, I have a very small amount of sports information, but
Yeah,
little
tell
bit.
me about it. Or
Now, I find
pop
that
culture.
well, that collection of knowledge becomes useful when you can connect what seem to be totally disconnected things and
Mm.
come up with a new solution.
Mhm.
And as we talked about patience, Griffin and I have little to give financially or physically, but we can give patience. We can get in, we might choose to get in the line at the grocery store that says it's a new cashier doing training,
Yep.
because we know we have the patience to get through that with them.
Yeah, and it can be fun. It's like explaining to the new kid that, no, I paid for this at pharmacy. You can't scan it and stuff.
Oh,
But yeah,
I feel blessed when I will get a new person. I got the phlebotomist once at Red Cross,
Mm.
making her very first.
Oh
oh
my.
boy.
And,
First of
and I was like, don't worry, I've been here a lot of times. You're going to be fine. And it's like,
Mhm.
be able to reassure them, because that first time has got to be terrifying.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I got that. So that's a good thing. Been there, done that. I'm not worried about it anymore. It's that is definitely a blessing. I remember the terror
Mhm.
of not going to a new place. And the first time, I went to the college campus, and it's like, aren't they staring at us because we're young, too young? It's like, they don't give a shit. I have that. I wouldn't trade in how relaxed what you were saying about calling BS. I love understanding what the doctors are saying and being able to say, excuse me, you haven't taken this into account, or yes, I'm willing to try the new drug for a trial period, but first I want to know what is this test you're ordering, and what difference is it going to make in the treatment? Because if it's not going to make any difference in the treatment, no, there's no reason to do the test. I don't care if it's covered by the insurance or not. It's just pointless if it's not going to make a difference. And
Oh, yeah.
gosh, I never had that when I was younger. There's so many times life was miserable because I didn't know how to talk back to a person of authority.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a nice
Jen
thing.
Jen and I do it all the time now, especially me, having just spent something like 6 weeks in hospitals and rehab, and having a very scary, what I would consider life-threatening experience. You get sometimes you get a seasoned doctor who just a little off center on what they're seeing. On the other hand, you want to talk about Crohn's? Well, I doubt that she's old enough to be a Crone. But there's this night nurse at Loretto named Val. And she's this, I hate to use stereotypes, but she's this classic Black motherly type. And we hit it off just fine. And one night she came in, she took my vital signs, and then she just sat down in the chair in my room and stared at the machine. She ended up sitting in that chair for I was asleep by the time anything happened. Well, she had an instinct based on her years of nursing and caring for people that something wasn't right. And I got up in the morning and they said, well, first of all, she told me, she says, they brought in this nebulizer and gave me that treatment. She says, I've also asked a doctor to order chest x-rays in the morning. So based on nothing more than her gut instinct, they gave me the nebulizer, they gave me the chest x-rays, and guess what, boys and girls? I had bilateral pneumonia that nobody knew about. And she found it in a way only a Crone can.
Mhm. Yeah, there's that heightened intuition, that
Oh
sense.
boy, did she ever have that.
Something's off, you know?
And thank goodness she had that and spoke up.
Oh yeah.
And that's another Crone, is that not only is it the intuition, but the ability to speak up and use
Yeah.
voice and stand
Mhm.
by it. Like, no, you're not going to talk me out of this. I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just wanted to bring in from the chat about, what gifts has Cronehood or aging brought. And one said, I'm really, really good at building bridges between various communities and different
Oh
types
yeah.
of people.
Building
And
bridges.
regarding the youth rushing around and, older people having more patience, they write, many people under 30 feel as if they do not have the time due to various societal drama, environmental factors, etc. So they are going to do what they enjoy now and shove as much into their schedule as possible.
Mm.
So
That could be a really useful thing if there's a lot of things that probably aren't going to be around much longer. We've lived in the golden age, and I can well imagine that the stories our children will tell their children about what it was like back in the late 20th century and the early, it's like, no, it couldn't have been that good. Because we hit 8 billion yesterday.
Yes, we did.
Wow. We are, I am wondering, I don't know if anybody else remembers what, I think it was one of Starhawk's books about the old women just going out and digging up the road and starting to plant a garden there because they were old and they no longer had any fracks to give. So I've started using frack as an alternative, as a mint stove. It's evil enough on its own. So, but I think that the old women who are just like, what the heck? And at least at my age, and I don't know how many of you are 70 or older now, but there is that thing hanging over your head, no matter how good you feel, no matter how healthy you are. We've seen it on in our friends. You could wake up tomorrow with a cough, or you could wake up with a, just a twinge or someplace, and the next thing you know, you're in the hospital fighting for your life, and it came out of nowhere. So once you are over 70, maybe over 65, depending on what you've seen among your friends, how many of your friends are dead, you've got to just say, go for it, because you may not have the opportunity to read that book, to binge watch Game of Thrones. I don't know what do people do when they say, I can't do that anymore. To say I love you to the person who, to call up your old school teacher and see if she's still alive, whatever. There are things that you just say, oh, I may not have another opportunity. So
yeah,
that's because you may not, it's not just dying. You may not have the energy. You may not have the mobility. You may not have the eyesight or the hearing. Very few things are as isolating as hearing loss. We do pretty well with our glasses and such, but you know, but hearing is loss of hearing is fairly isolating.
Yeah.
You definitely want to pay attention to the fact that even with all these other things, there are even smaller things, and that anything could be you'll never have a chance to do this again.
Go to Disneyland.
Never
Well,
gonna
who
happen for
cares?
me.
But you look at it, you have a chance to do something, and it could be something small and simple in everyday life. But you think to yourself, this may be my one chance. So we try not to miss out on that.
Yeah. And I noticed Angela in the chat has pointed out that that we have this great gift that was given to us in the 80s and 90s by the people who were dealing with AIDS, of knowing how perilous life can be.
Mm.
We had this major pandemic for the last 2 years, and people have started saying, well, I'm not going to do it anymore because I'm tired of it. Oh my God, talk about privilege.
Yeah, well, remember, there was something I said that you rather liked that led into one of my presentations, and it is the refusal or inability to accept our own mortality that is the cause of most spiritual distress. And the idea that we need to realize how perilous it is, but we're deeply and biologically rooted in a belief that I won't die, I can't die. So it leads to a lot of trouble.
So then the relationship with death changes with Cronehood as well. And in what way? Like, what is the new relationship with death?
Well, it can be anything, but I can think of an extreme example from my practice as a hospice trained home health aide. And I was dealing with an elderly man fighting cancer for the 4th time, this time losing. And a good example of Cronehood was the way his wife handled the whole situation. He had decided he was ready to accept it. She accepted it. And right up until the end, it was all about making these last days good ones. So they were both world accredited tennis judges at one point in their lives. Oh God, we watched a lot of tennis on TV. But there was no drama to her. It was there, it was happening, she was ready for it. I mean, the last night he was alive, I came in on my shift, clocked in on the phone and went over, and she was just sitting by the bed in her chair, holding his hand. And she just looked up, nodded at me, and I looked at him and I said, oops, this is it. And sat down in the chair on the other side of the bed. And he looked over. Yeah, he hadn't moved all day, looked over at me and reached out his hand, the other one. So I just spent 2 hours holding his hand. But his wife had been doing this 24 hours a day. So I consider her to be a truly classic crone in that sense. Someone who has come to terms with death and is ready to do whatever is required of her until it's over. And these are very spiritually moving events.
Death is a wonderful teacher that nobody wants to be in their class.
Yeah, really.
I know you're trying to pull it out of us, Vivien, but if you've done it with other people, can you give us some hints?
Hints. What sort of hints would you like?
I don't know. Angela's just talked about respect and giving and getting respect. Respect isn't, I don't think our culture does respect very well.
No.
Our culture doesn't, I mean, you can see it in politics, which I should probably not even bring up, but culturally, we're not very, I think it was wonderful when, as teenagers, we said, no, I'm not going to respect somebody who doesn't deserve it. So we didn't give automatic respect to elders who were being jackasses, but to not give anybody respect, to essentially test and say, I'm not going to give you any respect until you prove you deserve it. It's no, you should give everybody respect until they prove they don't. Is, I think, a better way of handling it. And I don't think our culture handles it very well. Culture can be really supportive or not. And our culture is not really very supportive of a lot of the things I'd like to see.
No. And what you just spoke to, I feel, is another example of the gift of discernment. Knowing when to offer respect and show respect, when to withhold, what the difference is. And it comes from experience. It comes from, when you talked about you're able to see the bigger picture, make all these connections that couldn't happen earlier. It's when you can make those connections, it also ties in with the discernment. And so all of that I'm seeing layered as the bigger perspective, seeing how things connect that others might not be aware of, discerning, and then the intuitive strengthening our own natural spiritual gifts to even deepen that, to use our voice. And as you shared about the night nurse who knew something else was up. Again, it's the ability to lean into a heightened sense of intuition, to discern what to say, what to do, when to act, who to pull in. These are all beautiful gifts that come with, the crone, and which are honored in other cultures. But again, our current modern, American society has forgotten that, has forgotten the crone, which is an opportunity for us to bring her back and to be her with pride, and as a modeling, as a form of education, of seeding the path for those who are coming behind.
We are already behind for the last decade or so, and then the pandemic hit. We are more isolated from other age groups. Even in school, you don't want somebody dating somebody who's more than 2 years difference in their age. Whereas people get older and then they'll marry people 10 years apart if they're suitable. We don't hang around with people who aren't our age mates. They've got communities. Just please, let's get all these old people who have walkers and who need hearing aids. So let's keep them off to the side. And some of these communities say, well, let's keep the children out because we don't want them around. It's like, we are so isolated from other generations that when you say we've forgotten the crone, it's easy to forget somebody you never see.
Yes.
And of course, to a certain extent, there's also the question of, if you think about how old ladies, and I'm not talking crones, because if you think of crone, you think of a witchy woman, they tend to have a lot of personality in how they dress and present themselves. But the average woman, as I think it was Edith Head said at the Lord in his infinite wisdom has dressed the elephant in taupe and the hummingbird in emerald and ruby, and I would not presume to argue. If you look
That's not
at
even
the
funny.
clothing that is available for old people, it's really boring and ugly,
Yeah.
which is why some of us make our own. And
Mhm.
and why the people who are more crone and less just aging baby boomer, maybe the aging baby boomers are the crones, tend to dress with a little bit more flair. I mean, it, to a certain extent, we do look a bit ridiculous wearing clothes that were designed for the teeny boppers. Actually, do they still have teeny boppers? but you know, I've taken up wearing shawls, which is a fun thing. Also makes me good. I wear, you can't tell, but I wear big skirts. I wear a lot of strange things, and I do, like, for instance, I will wear long striped stockings. So people will come up and say, "Are you a witch?" And I said, "Well, depends on your definition."
Mhm.
But I like to have people look at me and not be able to figure out what category I'm in.
Mhm.
Because people will do that. They'll look at your clothing and they'll decide whether you're a Karen or whether you're a, you know, crazy lady, or whether you're somebody who's a high-powered executive who probably won't listen to you no matter what you say, or whether you're somebody's grandmother, which I kind of lean into the grandmothery look because it makes you safer. People will trust you more. But I want to disorient, especially people in authority, so they can't put me in a box and they actually have to listen to try and figure me out. The longer it takes for them to figure me out, the more likely they are to actually listen to me. And that is people are very quick to fit you in a category. And then once that's in there, they don't have to worry about it. They'll just treat you like that category.
Yeah. My childhood was spent in a Ivy League campus, living in an apartment building my parents owned there. And I would sit on my front lawn and watch peace marches go by and all that. And I'd listen to the jam sessions that were happening at the dorm next door. I still lean on the hippie look.
Mm-hmm.
The long skirts, the bright colors, the, you know, the braless look, etc. That's my look, and that's what I try to find. I've got some clothes where I can pass for ordinary. But I definitely lean towards the hippie look, the feathers in the hair and all that.
I find it interesting that you differentiated between the crone and older people. What do you, and for everyone, for you, what is the difference? Like, what makes an older person a crone versus staying an older person? And you mentioned a little bit about witchy. So is it,
She's claimed her, a crone is an older woman who has claimed her crown. She's the one who is glorious and unapologetic.
Whereas an
Otherwise,
old woman is somebody who stayed mainstream and
I think about
recipes
it because I thought about it a lot while I was in the hospital for and rehab for over a month. And is, how do you want people to remember you? And I think my clothing and my attitude and everything else reflects the fact that I want people to remember me as a kindly grandfather or father. And one reason they liked me so much at Loretto is always say thank you, compliment them on when they do something, to laugh, make jokes. And when you have a chance get into a conversation that makes them feel good about the job they're doing. And that's what I've always tried to be, which is why I tend to dress like a retired farmer with plaid shirts and plain pants. And I don't want any more than that. There's simplicity is one of my hallmarks. Is if they ever have a contest for the most boring wardrobe on earth, I'm going to enter.
So Mimi wrote, I've encountered mainstream women who I considered to be a crone. So Mimi, what's the designation
Okay.
for you?
Maybe
of cronehood?
mainstream wasn't a good choice.
Well, okay, so I've been going back and forth on jumping in the conversation and then pulling back. And for me, the definition, and I hate to use the word definition because that's limiting, but okay, so for myself, I stopped bleeding when I think I was 52, so about 4 years ago. And I started referring to myself as entering into my crone years, or telling friends that, oh, I'm embracing being a crone. And the response I would get was overwhelmingly negative. No, Mimi, you're not old. You're not a crone. You're not this, you're not that. And I was like, okay, clearly the people I was hearing this from, you know, they had their own issues with it. I've never, now this is an interesting statement I'm going to make. Up until now, I never had an issue with upcoming birthdays. When I turned 50, I was so amused and I was so looking forward to it. I turned 57 next month and it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like, okay, wait, that is officially closer to 60 than it is 50. I mean, I know 56 is officially closer to 60, but it's just that one step further. And so I asked myself, okay, does that change anything? Yes and no. And I don't have to be defined by the number. I still will occasionally refer to myself as a crone or being in my crone years. My friends know not to react negatively when I say it because they understand where I'm coming from with it. But I think a lot of it is, and I know this is really big and I don't know how we begin to do this, but changing the perception of the word, not only the word crone, but the older years. And, you know, like I've heard some things here said about what defines a crone that I don't necessarily agree with. And I've heard some things that I do. And then I looked it up online. Okay, I always, when a word starts to take on too many meanings, I always go back to the dictionary. And the first thing that came up, and it's from the Oxford Dictionary, the very first definition that comes up is an old woman who is thin and ugly. So it comes back to communication and perception. And, you know, a lot of things that have been discussed as being unique to older years, I don't necessarily agree were unique to older years. Like Angela, I believe in the chat, had pointed out certain things that were being discussed and that she said like she was in her 40s and could relate to. And there were a lot of things being discussed that I know I went through when I was in my 30s or that I'm going through now in my 50s. And for me, it comes back to communication, getting everybody speaking to each other again. Is in recent years, without going off on a tangent, in recent years, especially the art of communication has been damaged.
Yeah.
And we're all great at talking. We're great at talking at each other, but are we speaking with each other? And more importantly, are we listening? So it's okay, listening to each other. So if we're going to take all of us in this group and then listening, so let's, you know, plop us all into one category of falling into a certain age range. And then how do we then listen better to the younger generations and then inspire them to listen better to us. So as you see, I have no answers. I just have questions.
Well, you're the best kind of person, man.
Yes. And
Well,
you have
there
a
are
wonderful
times when I
cat.
think I have answers. This just isn't one of them.
And
Right,
please don't be
well,
afraid to let your cat on screen, by the way. We
I'm
love
sorry.
cats here. Don't be afraid to let your cat on screen. We love cats here.
I just don't want her to, Lord knows what she'll type in the chat.
Yeah, but I happened to be glancing away, and then I looked down, and you had been replaced by this ball of fur, and I wondered what happened. But then I thought about Jen. I said, "Oh, she's got a cat on her chest."
I shape shifted.
Jeez, was the hair difficult?
I didn't get that power when I got to be a crone.
Oh,
But I think, Vivien, okay, if I was to answer your question, it would be wisdom. We gain a certain amount of wisdom with each day that we're lucky to be alive. And I think then with age, and yeah, we had wisdom in our 20s and our 30s. We just didn't realize that's what it was. And we didn't value it because at that point, it's just information and knowledge, but it's the years of living with that information and knowledge and seeing what we keep and what sticks with us that shows us, okay, wait, no, there's wisdom to that. And I think it's, for me at least, as I get older, I trust more in what I know. And
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to even label some of it wisdom,
Right.
and the willingness to share it.
yeah, and it is really important too, because yeah, wisdom is something like at one level, I see it as an enhanced ability to put things in context. And in order to do a good job of that, you have to have a lot of context on hand. When you're 20, you don't have a lot of context. When you're 70, you realize that all of this miscellaneous crap that happened to you over 7 decades has given you this junk bin to pull from to build just about anything. And I find that very comforting to know that, you know, because in Buddhism in general and Zen in particular, you're always looking to reach a point where you've lost all the noise garbage in your head and you're now kind of relaxed, alert, at ease. And when you look at something, you will know the inherent rightness and wrongness of it without having to think about it. And you see an interaction between you two people. As you get more and more of the wisdom, you can get a bigger context and see beyond the surface. And that, I think, is where you figure out if to do anything and what and when. So
Beautiful.
Yeah, where to expend your precious energy.
oh yeah, absolutely.
And it was there's a phrase that I'm hearing this decade I hadn't heard before, which is that the hill you've chosen to die on?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Which is, you hadn't heard that one.
Really?
I'm hearing it all over the
Oh,
Yeah, that's been everywhere.
place, but I hadn't heard
not
it.
anywhere I go.
And it is, you know, sometimes that's where it's like people who are broke, when you see them spending money, you know how precious that is. When you see an old person investing some time, you know how precious that is,
Yeah.
because
And for a lot of old people, that's the widow's mite.
Yeah.
And yet they give it gladly.
Yeah. But that is a generosity when you have so little time or energy. When your CFIT's friends, you know, the chronic fatigue people are giving you of their time, it's like, that is a precious gift. Oh, what have I learned? I'll tell you, I've gotten a lot of mileage out of telling people, you know better than that.
Mm.
It's like, you're a better person than that. And when I do that, people tend to start behaving better. And my God, that's, that's the, if you think about, if you ever wondered what you were going to be when you were a grandmother, what kind you were going to be. And I always wanted to be the kind of grandmother that nobody, the old Southern lady who nobody is going to misbehave in front of. And,
Yes.
and a lot of times people will be griping about somebody else. They've never done that in front of me. And they say, well, that's because nobody's going to do that in front of you. And I was like, yes, I made it. But people will try to live up or down to your expectations, and expectations can be a mighty weapon.
Oh yeah. It's been decades now that we've been talking about expectations, especially in younger people. And if you constantly and consistently expect a person to behave well, to do well, excuse me, they will. Simple as that.
But sometimes reminding is helpful.
Yes.
If
Oh yeah.
be your better self. It's like, I know you're better than that. You're not, that's not who you are. And, occasionally they'll say, yes, it is. It's like, no, you're a better person than that.
Well, I think that's a very Crone-like gift.
Well, like I said, it's the old grandmother that nobody wants to misbehave in front of. My grandmothers were terrifying. I will. One of the tricks that I will never get to, my children aren't breeding. So, but if we misbehaved, my grandmother would send us out to bring in a switch so that she could spank us with it. And if she brought you a big one, she said, no, that hasn't got enough whip in it. And if you said get a skinny one, she said, that's not big enough. And by the time she was satisfied, you were just a puddle of tears. And now we're going to do whatever it was again. It's like, oh no. But,
Walk in with the oak tree from the front yard.
But yeah, grandmothers have got all of the little tricks down. They know how people work. and let's not say wonderful manipulators, but they can be.
But that's possible at every age.
Yes, but I love the way that mine did it. So I suppose.
Yeah.
Yes. Mimi, your grandmother was the one who misbehaved.
Oh yes, I am somewhat of a little bit of a Crone clone of hers. I did that when I was 16. I pulled my hair back and I looked, and I looked just like her picture of when she was 16. And so I know what I'm going to look like when I'm 92 and in my coffin. Except that she continued her whole life to dye her hair blonde, and whereas I enjoyed the racing stripes here. But I mean, if you can do this, then why not play with it, right? But
Exactly.
But anyway, yeah. But I think Croning works better when you embrace it. Or aging works better when you embrace it. I don't embrace getting creaky. I don't embrace losing my teeth. I don't embrace going deaf, but I embrace learning a whole lot of stuff and being able to teach people it. I embrace giving up my inhibitions. Who needs to get drunk when you don't give a shit anyway?
And that's what one of the things I've learned the best is that I don't have to care about anything anybody else thinks or does or says or. Yeah, you're muted, Phil.
That is the gift.
That was I felt this transition in a state of grace where I no longer gave a rat's ass what anybody thought of me. And it is so liberating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're
Yes.
sitting there, that's real power. And it's one of those things, again, it's reflected in the spiritual practice. And that was one thing you would see in stories about the notable masters. When you got right down to it, they were fiercely devoted to their practice and to their students. But in everything else, they didn't give a rat's ass what you thought. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But okay, so would you say that aging or Cronehood is a state of mind, or you have more, you probably know more than I do about it as a blood mystery. I haven't looked into that. Oh boy, another thing to research.
State of mind is definitely a key part. I mean, it's not, I don't want to be reductionist and say that it's
Yeah.
strictly age or strictly state of mind or strictly experience or strictly like anything, because it's more than that. It
Well, how
is.
about state of being, which encompasses all of those?
Yes, I like that. Crone as state of being.
Mhm.
And one that we can all model and champion for the world, so she is seen and heard more, and people no longer have the reaction of, no, you're not a crone, don't say that about yourself. But it can be recognized as the title that it is.
It is, and I just noticed that we've run over a little bit, but
Yeah.
that sounds like a wonderful place to end. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for coming on. I'm sorry
thank
that
you.
we weren't as talky
No, it was
as we
beautiful.
were. I'm going to put the I don't know how much everybody knows about this, but if you look down at the bottom of the chat, there are 3 dots, and if you want to save your chat, you click on those 3 dots and you can save the chat. And I've just put in the link to the well, no, it's actually to Vivien Monroe. Is there a different link to the women's?
Vivien just put in a
They
link.
just put the link into the school.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
There, so people can get that. I'm going to stop the recording, and yes, stop recording.